I have full confidence in Catherine and William. Their judgment is sound, their loyalty unquestionable.
The room did not erupt. It froze. One sentence, delivered with calm finality, changed the balance of the family forever. King Edmund of Valois stood before the senior household and announced that Crown Prince Alaric and his wife, Princess Helena, would assume the central powers of royal leadership, while Queen Consort Isolde would lose any future family title, ceremonial standing, and internal authority. For Isolde, the words did not sound like administration. They sounded like exile. Isolde did not move. She did not speak. Her fingers tightened together in her lap as the silence around her grew heavier than any accusation could have been. Edmund had not raised his voice, and that made the moment even more devastating. The king had spoken in the careful tone of a man who knew every word would be remembered, but his face carried the strain of someone tearing through a bond that had once seemed untouchable. The senior household meeting, a private gathering where the monarch, close family members, and trusted advisors discuss sensitive decisions before they become public, had begun with controlled formality. Yet within minutes, it became the most painful turning point of his reign. Edmund understood what the new authority structure meant. It was not a scheduled change or ceremonial reshuffle. It was the planned transfer of influence, public responsibility, and private decision-making power inside the family. Alaric would no longer stand only as the heir waiting for his time. He would now help shape the family's direction from the center. Helena would no longer be seen merely as the loyal wife beside him. She had become part of the emotional and practical core of the monarchy, and Isolde, still seated before them, had just heard that her future place inside that structure had been removed completely. Alaric lowered his eyes, and that single movement carried more force than triumph ever could. He knew this was power arriving through fracture, and he did not look victorious. He looked burdened. Helena remained still beside him, her silence steady but not cold, as though she understood that authority gained during another woman's humiliation could never feel clean. Isolde finally looked toward Edmund, waiting for softness, waiting for a sentence that might turn the blade away. But the king gave her none. His choice had already been made. The silence revealed the question no one dared speak. Why now? Why so suddenly? But before anyone could understand why Isolde had been stripped of her place, they had to understand who stood to lose everything, and who had just inherited the burden of control. Power does not move through a monarchy like paper across a desk. It moves through faces, wounds, and private histories. Edmund felt the weight first. He stood before them as king, but his voice carried the pain of a husband who knew the sentence had already wounded the woman seated across from him. The monarchy, an institution that survives through duty and controlled family order, could not keep moving forward while old tensions shaped every private decision. Survival had become stronger than comfort, and that truth sat on his face before anyone dared name it. Isolde felt erased in the cruelest way possible. She had not been challenged in public. She had been removed inside a private room where every person understood the meaning before the words had finished landing. She looked toward Edmund, then away, as if the familiar walls had suddenly become strange to her. She was not only losing influence, she was losing belonging, and that cut deeper than any title could explain. Alaric watched his father avoid her eyes. The small gesture told him the decision had not been made in panic. Edmund had rehearsed this. He had carried it into the room long before anyone heard it aloud. That made the moment colder, not louder. Helena carried her own silence carefully. She understood that her rise beside Alaric would be judged against Isolde's fall, and that made the honor feel heavier than victory. She remained calm, but not untouched. She knew another woman's humiliation had become the doorway to her own authority, and that truth followed her into every breath. A senior advisor closed a leather folder with quiet finality. That sound changed the room. It suggested structure, preparation, a decision backed by more than emotion. Alaric heard it and understood something chilling. This was not merely his father choosing between people. Something behind the scenes had forced the king's hand. Every crisis has a moment people later point to and whisper. That was when it changed. For this family, it was a private dinner 6 weeks earlier, when Isolde had challenged Helena's role in front of senior relatives and questioned whether Alaric should be trusted with family authority before the crown had fully passed to him. She spoke as if asking a careful question, but everyone at the table felt the edge beneath it. The dinner had been arranged to calm fears about the future. Instead, it exposed them. Helena stayed composed, but the stillness hurt. She heard Isolde question whether her place beside Alaric had grown too large too soon, and she answered with control rather than anger. That made the room even colder. Alaric felt heat rise in him but held it down, knowing one uncontrolled sentence could split the table in half. Edmund noticed the room shift, not through outrage, but through discomfort. A fork set down. A pause that lasted too long. Isolde had forced everyone to see that divided authority would follow the family into every future decision. Later, his sister Duchess Rosalind told him privately that the family could survive disagreement, but not two centers of control pulling against each other. Edmund knew she was right. That dinner became the hidden fuse beneath the announcement that left Isolde speechless. The confrontation began with a door closing. Edmund asked everyone to leave, and Isolde faced the man whose name had protected her for years. On the table between them sat the written decision, but the real wound was not in the paper. It was in his voice. Isolde asked if the family had decided she no longer belonged. Edmund looked down, and that pause wounded her more than a quick answer could have. She pushed harder, accusing Alaric and Elena of waiting for the old order to collapse so they could step into power without resistance. Edmund lifted his head, and the accusation reached something deeper in him. He told her his son had not asked for her humiliation, and Elena had not built her future on cruelty. Alaric had carried restraint when anger would have been easier. Elena had carried dignity when triumph would have looked stronger. The monarchy, Edmund said, could not afford another generation of private rivalry becoming public weakness. He would not leave his son and daughter-in-law to inherit the same poisoned structure. Isolde stared at him, and the silence between them hardened. He reached for his pen, then set it down beside the document instead of signing anything further. Nothing more was being negotiated. Isolde understood that power had moved beyond her reach, and Edmund had chosen not to call it back. The next morning hurt more than the announcement. Isolde entered her office expecting the familiar rhythm of royal life: schedules, briefings, quiet authority. Instead, she found empty spaces where her future duties had been removed. A chair moved away from the planning table. A nameplate gone. For the first time, the silence belonged to her. Edmund heard about the office changes before noon, and closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the pain of it, but not regret. He knew speed was necessary because hesitation would invite confusion, and confusion would invite resistance. Elena saw a vacant place on a seating plan and stopped, quietly asking that no one speak cruelly about it. Her words changed the mood around the table. She understood that strength did not mean enjoying another woman's collapse. That understanding led to one private meeting no title or protocol could control. Elena entered the small sitting room alone, knowing Isolde might see her as the face of everything she had lost. Isolde looked at her with wounded stillness, and for several seconds, the monarchy disappeared. Only two women remained. Isolde asked if Elena had come to witness the defeat. Elena did not soften the word. She said she had not come to enjoy anything. She had come because humiliation should never become entertainment, even inside a palace. Those words shifted the room. Isolde looked away, but she listened. Elena did not pretend the decision would change. She made clear that power did not require cruelty, and that dignity could remain even after authority had gone. Isolde finally admitted what she had not said to Edmund. She had never feared losing public approval as much as losing her place inside the family. Elena heard the confession and understood the wound beneath the pride. Isolde was not only angry because she had lost control. She was grieving because control had once made her feel safe. Elena made one promise. She would not restore what Edmund had taken, and she would not challenge Alaric's new authority. But she would not allow Isolde to be mocked inside the family's walls. Isolde did not thank her. Not yet. But her silence changed. By morning, the private decision had become a national spectacle. Newspapers carried the king in profile, Alaric and Elena beside him, Isolde isolated in a shadowed corner beneath the words "the power shift." Isolde saw the front page before anyone could soften it for her, looked at the image, and turned the paper over without speaking. Alaric watched the coverage with visible discomfort, understanding that public approval can still feel cruel when it comes through another person's pain. Elena became the contrast everyone noticed. She had not mocked Isolde, had not celebrated her removal. That restraint shaped the public mood. Commentators described her as calm and steady, while the wider drama around Isolde grew louder. Edmund approved the palace statement after reading it twice. It avoided harsh language, but its meaning was unmistakable: a permanent change in family authority, not a temporary adjustment. Isolde heard the wording and understood the final blow. Permanent. not reversible. In the end, the announcement was remembered not only as the day Isolde lost a title, but as the day the monarchy admitted that survival required a new center of gravity. Edmund had chosen continuity over comfort. Alaric had accepted authority without triumph. Elena had carried power without cruelty. And Isolde, speechless in the beginning, became the symbol of an era that could no longer command the room. The crown had chosen its future, and everyone inside the family finally understood the cost.